What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Thursday edition of the Corona Sports Podcast with your host, Jimmy Corona. Today, we're going to go over some of the top 5 games that I have for the weekend and 3 shocks of the weekend, which is basically kind of like the upset alert. That's what I got for us today. I'm really excited. This is how normal Thursdays are going to start. It's kind of the start of the week. We break down games. We get into what I think shocks is going to be. Then we get to Saturday, watch all the big games. Tuesday's going to be the recap. Wednesday's going to be the top 10, I thought, after that week. And maybe sometimes the Heisman, maybe other things too. Like what are my big surprises and everything like that going on throughout the season. Maybe a playoff bracket in the future. CFP, like playoff rankings reaction, everything. Everything's going to be in the future for that. I'm really excited for today, so let's get right into it. First game that I have. Now, the way everything's going to break down is I'm going to give you games. So we're going to go with Ohio State, Iowa to start. And I'm going to talk about the key takeaways that we should have for each team. So Ohio State is the first team I'm going to talk about today. And, of course, going to this game, going to be really excited to see Ohio State play against Iowa. I think Iowa is a really good team. I think overall, if they don't allow Iowa State to come back and kick a field goal, they would be 4-0 heading into this and probably a top 15 team. So I think overall, the questions I have for Ohio State in this game, for one, it's kind of our first test against a decent defense. Michigan State is improved, but this is like one of the real tests before we go to Oregon. Is it a look-over game? That's what a lot of people are thinking. Okay, Oregon's next week. This is a big game. We're amped up and everything. But we got to take care of who's on the field first. If Iowa is on the field first before the big game this weekend, I am really kind of got like, okay, we need to come out and just do what we need to do. I think the biggest question comes, for one, Iowa's got one of the best running backs in the country. Can we stop the run? The team up north has beaten Ohio State multiple times because they are able to run the ball, control the game, control them into their script, not our script. So Iowa is similar. They just haven't been that way for years. They haven't been in the potential to beat good teams since probably like 2019, 2020. Iowa script is basically, we're going to punch you right in the mouth and we're going to keep running the ball at you. We're going to use zone defense to keep everything in front of you, force you into field goals. That is basically what Iowa's defense and offense is going to be. I would not be surprised if Iowa, out of the box score, has at least 100 yards rushing and even maybe eclipse 100 yards passing. I'd be surprised. But they're really going to test our front seven. And I think that's the biggest question for Ohio State. And a lot of people out there in the country, they're curious to see how good that front seven is, because the beginning of the year had a lot of hype. The Ohio State defense had a lot of hype because they got Caleb Downs, bunch of returners, and everything like that. But as you could tell by the weeks have progressed, it seems like they're regressing and not the elite defense they were last year. And I think that is a big problem. And I'm kind of curious to see how they're going to do against this rushing attack, because I will tell you right now, Iowa will punch them right in the mouth, and I'm really curious to see how they're going to respond. I really think the keys for Iowa in this game are going to be time of possession, for one, getting Ohio State off their script and into their script. If you can control the game, limit the possessions for Ohio State, and get them all confused and all upset and get them out of rhythm, that is a recipe for Iowa to win. So I've seen it in Urban Meyer's years when Urban Meyer was coach at Ohio State. Iowa cooked Ohio State one year. And it was kind of like this, where it's kind of like a look away game where you're like, all right, it's Iowa. You know, they're 3-1. They're all right, you know, but it's you never overlook an opponent, especially an opponent like Iowa. Iowa is going to come in there and going to test them. They're going to get tested. So that's kind of my keys for Iowa. I think to just get into their script, force turnovers, and try to see if your offensive identity is going to work, because they have struggled with the offense for the last few years, and it's the reason why they haven't been able to hit the next step of being like from being in the middle of the pack to being in the top tier. The reason why they were in the top tier the last few years is because of conference divisions. They were in the West. The West was kind of a weaker side of the conference compared to the East, where it had Ohio State, Penn State. Last year was Maryland. Few years it's been Michigan State. You know, like there's all kinds of teams in the East that were making runs, and I think the record was ridiculous. Like the West was like, I want to say like 2-14 in those games. It's crazy. The Big Ten championship games, crazy. But that's why I think this is kind of like a big game for Iowa. What are they going to get tested? Like, what is going to work and what's not going to work? We're going to really see how good this defense is and how good their offense is. I really want to say this is how the game's going to go. First half's going to be a 14-10 slugfest. People are going to get worried. They're like, why is Ohio State not dominating? I think the Big Ten is a really good conference. I really think the SEC is a really good conference. Any team can get beat week to week. I really see the top end teams can struggle against like the mid pack, because the mid pack has their strengths and they're gonna throw everything they got at you because they know that they need to throw everything to win big games. So I think Iowa's gonna throw stuff that Ohio State hasn't seen on film from them, and I think it's gonna be like a 14-10 slugfest. And then once Ohio State figures it out, they're gonna just blast it wide open. It'll be like 35-10, 42-10 game by the end of the game. And I think Ohio State will come in with a win, and then we'll preview next week against Oregon, which that would be a way tougher matchup, in my opinion. No, no hate towards Iowa, but it's gonna be a great game on Saturday. I'm excited to go to it. Excited to watch how both teams are gonna play. My second game of the week, it's kind of the biggest game that a lot of people have. Texas A&M and Missouri. Missouri is traveling to Texas A&M. I think the biggest keys for Texas A&M in this game, for one, I think kind of similar. Texas A&M is 4-1, 2-0 in SEC play. They've been playing their best. I wouldn't say their best football, but they've been playing pretty good football to get to 4-1. After they lost to Notre Dame, a lot of people were writing them off, and now they're 4-1, 2-0. Big test. This is kind of the game that I kind of want to see if Texas A&M could really like push past being like this middle pack to lower tier team in the SEC and maybe get to the middle tier, upper middle tier. Just really depends. This is really big for their season. I'm pretty sure they play Bama and they play a couple other big teams in there. This is a big game for Texas A&M. It's a really big game for Missouri. Missouri has 2 top 25 teams on their entire schedule. A&M, which a lot of people have A&M beating Missouri, which I'll get to in a little bit. And then Missouri plays Bama, and we know for a fact that's going to be horrific. If they lose to A&M, then we're going to know that Bama is probably going to smoke Missouri. So this is a really big game. It's really going to tell us what Missouri's going to be like. It's really going to tell us to see where Texas A&M is at with their offense, with their defense. it's and go from there. First year Mike Elko. This is his first year coaching at A&M. New office coordinator, defense coordinator. It's his program now, but you won't see the program through recruits until probably like year 3, year 4. So I'm really curious to see how this game's gonna go. I think Texas A&M's loudness at their stadium is gonna be electric. It's gonna be a top 10 team coming in. They're gonna be going bananas there. Um, I think if they can funnel the noise and make some turnovers happen and maybe be able to throw the ball, rush the football as good as they've been doing, rushing the football, I think it creates a recipe for Missouri to get upset. The reason why I think this could create a Missouri upset is Missouri best win is against Boston College. Now that defensive score is 12 points. That has not been the case. Those 12 points are dedicated to 2 blowouts against teams that are not even like, I think they're FCS. There may be one that's an FBS low tier, but the teams that when they went and played teams that are like even consider, I think that Vanderbilt and Boston College, those were the 2 teams they played that were not like consider low tier. I would say that they struggled. They struggled a lot. I could really see Missouri basically like this team that shows basically kind of like a cover of a book or like a glacier. Okay, so at the top of the glacier, you see this team. They're ranked number 9, right? They're at the top of the glacier. They're the rank of the number 9 team in the country. Oh, they're so good and everything like that. But when you break down to it, right? Who have they beat and who are they going to beat to win? And so when you go look at Georgia or Bama's schedule, right? So Georgia's schedule, they play Bama, they play Texas, they play Tennessee. You would be like, okay, so if Georgia went 2-1 in those games, right? They beat Tennessee and they beat Texas. So Georgia basically takes the bottom of the iceberg and makes the top of the iceberg like stay afloat. Basically is the prize of why they should be in the top 5, right? Missouri is not going to have that. Their resume is going to be all top, but like very thin at the bottom of that iceberg. That's the best way to describe it for Missouri. I think Missouri, this is a really big game. I think in order for them to even consider, which I don't know why it says 4-1, but we'll have to make that adjustment later. They're actually undefeated still. If Missouri comes out of this game with a win, they will be they'll be in a pretty good spot. So, how do I think Missouri Texas A&M game is going to go? I think Missouri is going to get tested. They have a really good receiver. They have a really good quarterback. I don't think they've been tested enough to be like, okay, we need to rely on Brady Cook. We need to rely on Burden. They have not gotten tested. So that number 9 rating, like I said, top of the iceberg looks beautiful, but the bottom doesn't hold up the iceberg. So I think Texas A&M is going to, with the experience of playing Notre Dame, even though Notre Dame's like a top 15 team at best, I think there's a potential that Texas A&M upsets them here, and I think it's a close game. The spread is 2 points towards A&M, and I'm low-key going to take that spread. I think it's going to be Texas A&M 27-24. I think it's going to be a really close game most of the game. I think Texas A&M is going to have that last drive, game-winning field goal. The place is going to erupt, go crazy. It is a recipe for getting upset. Bama has gotten upset there a few times. So I low key would not be surprised if Texas A&M went and beat Missouri. Um, so that's kind of my prediction for the A&M Missouri game. I think it's going to be a good game. Pretty sure it's either a noon or a 3:30 kickoff game. So I think it's going to be one of the games to watch that when I'm not watching Ohio State Iowa, I think it's going to be one of the games I'm going to be watching. So it's the only ranked matchup we have this week. The other ones that I'm going to get into are kind of just big conference like shuffle. What's going to happen next? And the first one we're going to get into actually is Nebraska and Rutgers. Rutgers is traveling to Nebraska. The thing about Nebraska is that their program under Scott Frost went through so much one possession games. They had so many issues with one possession games that they needed a new guy. They brought in Matt Rule, and he's made a big game changer. Nebraska used to be the team that I would be like, oh, we'll get into a game with them, but we're going to end up beating them, right? I think that that eighth game that we have on Ohio State's schedule, or even whoever they play in the next few weeks, I think it looks a little bit tougher than what it used to be like. Nebraska used to be a powerhouse back in the 90s, early 2000s. They used to be really good. Even after that, they were even still a pretty relevant, good team. They have not been like that since probably 2014, 2015. Nebraska's been in that downgrade where they're going through 6-6 seasons, 3-9 seasons. In 2020, in the COVID year, they didn't even do that good. They eclipsed, I think, 6-6 last year for the first time in forever. So I think it's been a really good change. Matt Rule's really changed his program. He got the number one quarterback in the recruiting class, which surprised everybody because I think he committed to Ohio State first, Georgia, then he committed to Nebraska, and then he ended up going there. Dylan Raiola has been really good for Nebraska. Last year, I'm pretty sure Sims was the Nebraska quarterback. Pretty sure had like 18 interceptions. Had a really tough time at Nebraska. Could not get them going like everybody thought they were going to, right? So I think Dylan Raiola is the guy that's going to be the game changer for Nebraska. Their only loss was to Illinois 2 weeks ago on a Friday. They played exceptional except in the big moments. And I think it was really hard to say that Raiola had moments like a freshman. He just came out of high school. He's a true freshman. He was in a big game for the first time. He's going to have those, his growing pains and stuff. So I'm not really looking at Nebraska. Nebraska could be the dark horse for this year. They could end up going to the championship game, even though they have a loss already. It really depends on how everything goes with the Big Ten beating each other up. But this is a critical game. They need to win this game in order to even stay in the conversation of that. Now we get to the other team. Rutgers, Grace Schiano. He came to Ohio State for a little bit prior. So I think the thing is for Rutgers is that Rutgers has been good. They've been like, then they've been good. Then they've been, then they've been good. Then they've had those really bad years. They're kind of like Michigan, where they got to develop their talent into something big, into like their championship teams. And Rutgers is kind of the same way, but they're not to that tier of Michigan where they're winning championships. They're at the tier that they're gonna go 9-3, 10-2, and be kind of that team that's really tough against like Ohio State and Oregon and Michigan some years. So this is one of their years. They're very, very experienced. I think they're going to be really tough for Nebraska. It's going to be a really tough game. I think Rutgers' strength is rushing the football. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how good this rushing attack is going to do against Nebraska, which Nebraska can hold teams rushing attacks and passing attacks. They don't have a bad defense. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see how Rutgers does in this game, in my opinion, I think it's going to be a Big Ten slugfest. You're gonna Rutgers is going to run the ball. Nebraska is going to try to throw the ball, but they're going to get. It's gonna be interesting. That's all I gotta say. Rutgers is not a bad team. They're one of the dark horses still in the Big Ten. They're undefeated, so I could really see Rutgers being like I said, a dark horse in the Big Ten. So I gotta say Rutgers 17-14. I think it's gonna be a slugfest. It's gonna be a really, like I said, tough game. I think, like I said, Rutgers 17-14. I think we'll get a lot. Dylan Raiola is gonna be tested, and it's gonna be one of those good middle games right before the Big Apples next week. Big games next 2 weeks. So excited for this college football season. And I think like every weekend comes with like kind of that surprise where you think these games are going to be the worst games, and then it ends up being the craziest weekend of the whole season. So I'm really excited. Really excited for the weekend to go see some of the go watch Iowa, Ohio State, go see some of the noon games, go see some of the 7:30 games. Hopefully tune in a little bit to the 3:30 games. So really excited. Really excited. The next game I'm going to talk about is Washington is hosting Michigan. Now this is a big one because basically, misclick. Basically, Washington is a first-year Big Ten team. They've done a lot of turnover. This is a national championship rematch, by the way. Michigan ended up winning 34-17. Nobody between these two teams are even even resemble those two teams. They're all completely different. It's a big turnover. Washington has been kind of quiet. They haven't been like a great team. They haven't been a bad team. They're kind of like in the middle. They gave Rutgers that game last week. They played really good, and then they gave Rutgers the game at the end of the game. Will Rogers has been a great quarterback. He played at Mississippi State for, I think, 3 years, and he was a really good starting quarterback there. He elevated what I would say is like a program to like a decent program. Considerably, shout out to Toledo. They kicked Mississippi State's butt in week 2, so just saying. That's kind of like what I mean by that. Will Rogers put Mississippi State back on the map after Dak Prescott did that in, I think, 2016, 2017. Sorry. It may have been 2014. Yeah. Wow, that's a long time ago. So I think Washington, Michigan's going to be really interesting. Washington's got a really good passing attack. They're going to test this Michigan defense. Their DBs are kind of on the weaker side. It was really exploited against Texas. Will Johnson's one of the best corners, but it's not a one-man team. It's a four-man team in the DB world, and he can't do it all. So I expect Washington to be able to attack that. They're going to attack the weakness, and they're going to try to get this into a game and stuff like that. I think the keys for Washington in order to win this game is they need to get out of not being in Michigan's schedule. That's going to be the key for any team that plays Michigan. They got to get out of the Michigan script. Do not get in the Michigan script of once they get a lead, they take control and they control the clock. And so far this season, they haven't been able to do that because they don't have the offense like they had before. They don't have the defense that they had before. It's kind of like you see hidden versions of it, but they're so young. They're still developing everybody that you don't see that the team that's been like that for the last 3 years. So I expect this to be a slugfest. Basically, like that's kind of my take for Washington. I think they're going to give it their all. They're going to really test Michigan. I think this is my keys for Michigan. Michigan's really been in slugfest all year. Fresno State was a slugfest. They got absolutely obliterated by Texas. Their third game, I think it was Arkansas State, and I think that was the game that they did, and then they played USC, and a lot of people had USC winning. There's only like one or two people that I saw that had Michigan winning. I was kind of shocked. I thought USC was gonna be. They're a really physical team. They're a very improved team, but I was kind of shocked that they didn't win that game. It was a really tough game, back and forth slugfest. Uh, Miller Moss was throwing dimes. Alice Orgy was getting that offense going. Mullins was dragging people. Really good game. So I think it's going to be exactly like that because they had the same game happen 2 weeks ago happened last week against Minnesota. 27-24. They've been in slugfest. So I expect this game to be the exact same. I don't think Michigan's going to really pull away. I think it's going to be back and forth, low scoring game. I don't think Washington's going to score a lot. I think Michigan's going to be able to run the ball a little bit more. I could see a 20-13 game, a 17-14 game, 17-10 game. It's going to be like one of those games. I don't think Washington's going to be able to elevate the game to be in the 30s or even maybe high 20s. I think it's going to be in the low 20s to teens. It's going to be a really pretty sure it's a 7:30 kickoff game, and it's going to be a great night game for Seattle. That place in Washington, it lives up to the hype. I saw when Oregon played them last year. It could get pretty hyped up there. So I bet you they're going to be turned for this game. Top 10 Michigan going in there. So that's my fourth game of the week. Now this one's going to kind of surprise people. This is really under the radar game. Nobody has talked about it. I'm probably going to be the only person that talks about it. It has really big implications in the Big 12 race. So we're going to get right into it. So Texas Tech is hosting Arizona. Now you're like, okay, why the hell is he talking about Texas Tech and Arizona? So Texas Tech is 2-0 in the Big 12, right? 4-1, which when I saw this, I was like, "Oh, what? Texas Tech is 4-1? They're in the race. Both of these teams are in the race for the Big 12. Big 12 is like 8 teams deep. There's so many like possibilities that could happen, and we're all gonna watch it here in the next like 8 weeks. So I'm really excited. This is one of the games that I like saw and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna talk about it because this is really important for the Big 12. 4-1 Texas Tech hosts a 3-1 Arizona team. Texas Tech can throw the ball. They look like their air raid attack has been working. I saw a score. Texas Tech is crazy to me. They've scored over. That's points per game is 41.6. But I'm pretty sure they scored in the 30s once. And they allowed everybody to score, I think, over 30. I don't think they've had a team score in the 20s. And they're 4-1. Don't ask me how they can't sustain that because Arizona's got a good defense. So I'm really curious to see. This is going to be the strength. The strength of this Texas Tech team against the strength of that Arizona team. Arizona's got a good defense. They got blown out by Kansas State in a non-conference game that I don't know. The whole thing with that is just confusing. It was not considered a Big 12 game, so it just makes no sense to me. But basically, they got absolutely destroyed by Kansas State. But then the next week, or I think it may have been 2 weeks, they played Utah last week, and they just beat Utah at their own building, which that's unheard of. If you ask anybody in the Pac-12 or even like, any of those teams that were in the Pac-12 last year or even before then, if you got Utah at night and at their home stadium, good luck. They are one of the hardest teams to play at their stadium and at night. Really hard to beat. So Texas Tech, Passing attack, I think, is going to be really critical in this game. Can they continue that against Arizona? Arizona's got a really good defense. I think they're gonna try to control this game. Um, as we're about to pull it up, I'm pretty sure their time of possession. Oh, okay. I thought it was in the 30s, but it's still near the 30-minute mark. I think the real question is going to go into this. Not really Texas Tech. I think we know what we're going to get out of Texas Tech. Absolutely horrible defense and amazing passing attack. I think Arizona's biggest question is, can they be able to throw the ball enough and outscore Texas Tech? And can they stop Texas Tech's offense as enough to have their offense outscore them? I think that's going to be really the biggest question. Their quarterbacks kind of struggled, even in recent games after their wide receiver McMillan went I think 7 catches, 350 yards the first week. He's been evaporated. Haven't heard his name since. And I'm really curious. This is a Big 12 game that really matters in the end, and I'm really excited to see what this box score is. Even if I can get to watch it, I'm gonna watch it. It's gonna be one of the biggest games. Everything else kind of just seems like So I'm really excited. We're gonna see how that game goes. We're gonna see how those other 4 games are gonna go. Now, the favorite topic I have for the week is my shocks for the week. What do I rate on a 1 to 10? What chances do these teams have of beating these ranked opponents? So I'm gonna pull it up right here. This is the graphic. So top 3 shocks for the week. We got Miami at Cal, Tennessee at Arkansas, Ole Miss at South Carolina. Now we're gonna go into the middle one. Normally we're gonna go down each one, but I'm gonna start with the middle one. Now we're gonna save Miami for the last one because I got a lot to say about that one. Tennessee at Arkansas. I put this up here because Arkansas is a good team. I think it's kind of like Tennessee's look ahead. I think they got Arkansas, then they got either a bye or they got another team, and then they got Bama. So I think Arkansas is kind of under the radar, kind of that team that's put Oklahoma State in a blender, that's made everybody's life hell every time they play them. But they just haven't been able to beat teams, so that's why they haven't been on the radar. So on a scale of 1 to 10, what do I think this game is for, would this be a big shock? If Arkansas upset them, I think it would be a big shock. I put Tennessee on upset alert 3. I think it could be a possibility. It's a pretty under the radar game. They're traveling to Arkansas at night. Could be an interesting game. Would not be surprised. Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if Arkansas got Tennessee in a game, but I wouldn't even be surprised if Tennessee is blowing them out. Just saying, one of the teams that I saw traveling. Another team that I didn't put on here is Bama and Vandy, but I don't think that game is too much on there. But I also would not be shocked by if Vanderbilt plays Bama tough because Bama just came off one of the biggest games of the year. And normally if you're really high on something like that, it could have a dip down. Could be a game in Vanderbilt. And I'm pretty sure that's also a night game too. So, pretty interesting. Ole Miss, South Carolina, I really don't got much to say. I'm just going to say this right now. I'm going to put a 7 on that. Ole Miss, they didn't do good against Kentucky. I expect South Carolina to shred them. I think South Carolina is one of the most physical teams in the SEC this year. They're really young. I think they have the potential to be one of those Tennessee teams where they're good one year and then they become that next tier of elite for a year and then they kind of go back to where they were. South Carolina's got the potential to do that in the next few years, but their defense is really good. They destroyed Kentucky 3 weeks ago. They put LSU in like a fourth quarter game. So I would not be shocked if South Carolina is beating Ole Miss or even kind of blows them out. Like I said, I think I got a 6 on this game. I really don't like Ole Miss chances against South Carolina. Cal versus Miami. Now this game is going to be really interesting. First time Miami is going from the East Coast to the West Coast during a conference game. So this is the first time Cal has been in the conference. Stanford's in the conference now. SMU's in the conference. So I'm really curious to see how Miami responds after having an absolute shit show last week to this week playing against California, having to travel. And by the way, they did not travel by plane. They traveled by bus. So this is going to be really interesting to see. Really excited to see how Miami plays. Cal is a decent team. I think they're like 3-2 or 4-1. They beat Auburn, which Auburn has played other teams tough. They barely lost to Florida State, which that's an absolute shit show of a team. Way underrated perspective that I thought they were going to be. I thought they were going to be maybe a 9-3 team, but no, they're not even that. They're going to be the dumpster fire over there. But anyways, I think that's kind of like, I think on that game from last week, it could be like a 5. Miami, that could be a tough game for them, but we'll see. Those are my 8 games that I got for this week. Next week, we're going to recap every bit of what I just put down for you guys. We're also going to get back into our next week episode of our Wednesday filler and then our big matchups for next week. I'm so excited. I'm so excited every week for college football. It's one of the biggest things that I love watching. And I cannot wait to bring you guys another video week. Basically, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. If you guys like the video, please drop a like. If you want to listen to more of this podcast, subscribe, turn on the alerts. And with that, have a great weekend. Enjoy football this weekend. And let me know what you guys think of the biggest upsets this weekend. Thank you.